Hey everybody, today I'm going over the top 10 things I feel you must do when you buy a used vehicle. Check this out. So one thing we get asked all the time is what should I look for when buying a used Jeep? And while I am going to use a Jeep in this video that I did buy, I want this to be very generalized to all the vehicles that I buy or have bought or that anybody's buying. So this video I want to be exactly about what you're looking for when you're going to purchase a used vehicle, to make sure that you know the things that I look for and the things that I want to feel comfortable in with the price point that I'll be paying. Secondly, it will be all the things that I do after I buy a used vehicle so that I know that I have the best chance of success without having any failures on the vehicle that I bought. As someone who owns a plethora of vehicles and has bought so many in 1 year at one time that I actually had the state tell me if I bought or sold any more vehicles I'd have to get a dealer license, I feel like I'm pretty well established and have a good knowledge of what I need to look for when I buy a used vehicle. What I want to do is break down the 10 must-do things. 5 things I feel you must do before buying a vehicle and 5 things I feel you must do after buying a vehicle. So this is what I bought. This is a 2003 Jeep Liberty Limited Edition. Let's go over the 5 things that I did prior to buying this vehicle. So number one, first thing I like to do is check the fluids. And what I mean by fluids is really more so the oil and the transmission fluid if it has an automatic transmission. So that's right here and right here. Okay, so the first thing I do when I pull the dipstick is I'm looking at the oil level. I want to make sure that it's in that safe zone. I also want to make sure that the oil looks good, that it's not crazy old, that it doesn't smell, that it doesn't have any metal in it, and that it isn't gray. If it's gray, that means water's getting into the oil. So that would mean I probably am not going to buy it. I don't want to deal with that issue unless I don't want the motor. Now the transmission dipstick, I am really not looking to see fluid level because there's a way to check that, and I'll show you guys that later. But what I'm actually looking for is, once again, I'm looking to see if it's red. You want it to be nice and bright and red. You don't want it to be dark, and you don't want it, you know, ooh, I touched my nose. If it smells burnt, that's not the end of the world. That just means you probably need to change the transmission fluid. There are friction modifiers in transmission fluid that you want to make sure are new and fresh. So that is one instance of something where if the transmission fluid is dark or if it smells burnt, if it shifts fine, I'm not that concerned with it. I just know that I am going to have to get the transmission fluid flushed, and that will be something that I'm going to consider in the price point of when I buy the used vehicle. So those are the 2 most important things I look for personally. I do give a quick look to the battery terminals, some other stuff. There are a handful of other fluids here that I normally just kind of glance at, you know, the brakes, power steering, and your antifreeze. I just kind of glance at them. I'm not too concerned with them. As long as the vehicle's running good, I know that I can always top those off when I get home. So just FYI, if anything under the hood is low, then I like to look underneath and see if there's any leaks or any places that it's actually leaking that fluid out. Number 2 is tires. Tires are a real important thing. You know, you can always go up and give them a kick, but realistically, if they have tire pressure in them, I mean, that's all you're going to be able to check normally when you're out looking at for a used vehicle. But there are a few things we can check on a tire to make sure that it's worth our value. First thing I always want to check is for tire feathering, and what I mean by that is if the tire is feathered. Normally it happens a lot more with 4-wheel drives too, but if it's out of alignment, or if there's a bad ball joint or bad tie rod end or bad steering piece or suspension piece, a lot of times these tires will feather a lot faster than if they were just regularly rotated every, you know, 5,000–10,000 miles. So I also look for uneven wear. If the tires had more wear on the inside of the tire or the outside of the tire, then I know that I probably need some suspension components or a part and an alignment. So those are things I factor in to the price point. So this is an important part. The DOT date code is an important part because most tire companies won't touch a tire between 6 to 10 years. So if they're 6 to 10 years old, they're going to tell you that we won't touch it. So if you have a tire flat or a tire that needs to be repaired, they may not even do it if it's past that DOT date code. In this case, what I can show you here is this spare tire. must have been the original spare tire to this vehicle. And why I say that is the DOT date code is always right around the rim. You know, here's your tire size and everything else, but here's the DOT number, or the DOT number, and then the date code is always the last four. And what that is that's the week and year that it was made. So it's the 36th week of 2003. 36th week of 2003. So this tire is that old. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it has weather checking in that sidewall. A lot of times you'll see weather checking inside, it's just cracks in the tire. A lot of times you'll see that weather checking in the tire itself too. So what does that mean? That means if that tire is over 6 years old on that DOT stamp, you got to remember that in the back of your head, that somebody may not, if you need a tire worked on or tire changed or plug or patch, they may not touch that tire, and you may end up having to buy 4 new tires, or in my case 5 new tires. So that is number 2. That is why I check, that's why I check all those things. So now that we're on to number 3, the third thing that I check is all the lights. And what I mean by all the lights is I turn on the headlights, I turn on the blinkers, I turn on the four-ways. This is why I always suggest, I mean, usually if you're looking at a car, you have somebody with you anyway. In case you buy it, you need to be able to drive it home. But I want to check high beams, low beams, headlights, tail lights, blinkers, marker lights, interior lights, anything that lights up or goes dark, I want to check it. Mostly because, number one, if I'm driving it home, I want to make sure that I'm street legal and I don't need to fix it right away. And then secondly, like I said, changing a bulb out usually isn't too bad on most vehicles. Sometimes, like my daughter's car, it is you have to pull the whole front bumper off to change the headlight out. So not super cool. If that's the case, if you do have a bad bulb, once again, that's another thing to negotiate on the price point of buying a used vehicle. Number 4 is the easiest part of buying a used vehicle, and that's going on test drive. Now that we've checked the fluids, we've checked the tires, and we've checked all the lights, we're going to start it up. I'm going to be looking for any warning signals, any warning lights saying I have a check engine light or an airbag light, and I want to listen for bangs, clunks, or any noises in the suspension. I want to make sure it steers okay, drives okay, that it's not pulling one way or another. And if there's any of those issues, once again, then I need to assess, okay, is that a price point issue or is that something else? Now, if it does have a check engine light, one of the things I do suggest, I mean, you can get on Amazon and you can buy code readers that plug into your OBD2 plug, and they're always usually right down underneath the dash on the driver's side. And you plug in your OBD2 and it will tell you what is wrong with the vehicle, or at least give you a number where you can Google what is wrong with the vehicle. These are usually only like 15 bucks on Amazon, so if you want a real cheap one, you can get them that way. This one's a little more than that, but not much. So that is one thing you can do, that you can bring with you when you go to buy a used vehicle. Also, while you're in that test drive, make sure if it's a four-wheel drive vehicle or whatever, you go through all the four-wheel drive functions. If you're in a paved road, you can just put it in a parking lot, put it in four-wheel drive, and then turn it. And if you feel it kind of hopping and bouncing, you know the four-wheel drive's working. That's about the best way that I've ever found to check it. I always shift it through all the gears, you know, make sure that your reverse, neutral, and drive all work. You know, if it's a manual transmission, obviously, that the clutch feels good, things like that. Number 5, which I think is one of the most important ones, and I have been burned by this before, is checking all of the electronics in the vehicle. The radio has never been the most important thing for me. You know, you can always check the radio, make sure that works. A lot of people check the radio. That is probably the least most important thing to me, because you can change it, you can fix them, you can buy aftermarket ones all day long pretty reasonably. The things I do want to check though are heat, AC. I want to make sure that the air blows, defrost face and floor. I want to make sure that my wipers work. I want to make sure that my seats work. I want to make sure that my windows work, and I want to make sure that my door locks work. As long as all my doors open and shut and all my door locks unlock and lock, all my windows go up and down from each point, and all the wipers work, then I feel pretty confident in purchasing a vehicle, knowing what I need to do to it. So knowing this, I was able to discount the price of what the owner wanted by $600, knowing that I needed to do a transmission flush and oil change. and eventually I need to do tires down the road. So that gives me confidence that now I can go home, and now I'm going to go through and assess the 5 most important things after buying a used vehicle that you need to go through. All right, so we purchased the car. The next thing we're going to do is go over the second 5 things that I think are important after you buy a vehicle. And I'm going to show you how to do it. That is so easy to do it, in fact, that we're going to have Ian do it. Why are you hiding? Come on over here. So we're going to have my son do it, and he's going to go through everything. What are some things you think we should go through?
The air filter and the oil filter, that's what we're doing, right? I don't know.
Well, that's part of it. Number 1 out of the second 5, so you could call it number 6. But the first thing you want to do after you bring a vehicle home that you've just bought that's used is I actually want to go through all the fluids. It's pretty much guaranteed if somebody's selling a vehicle, they're not going to change the oil, they're not going to get all the fluids changed before they go ahead and sell it. So we're going to go through all the fluids. So the first thing we're going to do again is check the oil. We'll make sure that it's still full before we go ahead and drain it. We're going to go ahead and drain it and do an oil change with an oil filter. Any vehicle, I'm not saying you have to do this yourself, but I do say that it is something you want to do when you buy a new vehicle. And the same with the transmission fluid. We are going to do the transmission fluid, but instead of us doing it, which all I could do physically here is drop the pan and only change half the fluid, is I'm going to take it to the dealership and have them actually flush it, because that way it's getting the torque converter and everything cleaned out, and I have a completely new clean transmission fluid all the way through the entire transmission. That is something too, I've had a lot of people tell me, well, if you flush your transmission, it hasn't been flushed before, this vehicle has 100,000 miles, and I've had people tell me, if you flush your transmission, it's never been flushed before, you're going to get particles and stuff in there. You may say that, and that may be something that people say, I don't know, but every vehicle I've ever bought, used, new, whatever, every 60,000 miles, or when it's brand new to me, even had 200,000 miles, I get the transmission flushed where they clean it out, and with the machine, it actually is pumping out the old stuff and pumping in new stuff until it's coming out as clean outward as it is inward. And so your entire system is flushed, and knock on wood, I've never had a transmission go out on me on any of my rock crawlers or haulers or anything else. The antifreeze, the washer fluid, the power steering fluid looks pretty low.
Yeah, it does.
So even though this thing drove good and ran good, the power steering fluid is actually low. So we'll have to fill it up a little bit. Check the brake fluid. Check any of the fluids that we can possibly check. Make sure that they're topped off, good to go. And then we're going to go down underneath. To do the transmission, to actually make sure it's full, you have to have the vehicle on, and you have to run it through all the gears. It has to be warm, and you put it through park, drive, neutral, and reverse, and then you check it, and that's how you check an automatic transmission fluid. We can check the differentials, and we can check the transfer case also, and make sure that those fluids are topped off. As we're checking anything underneath, we're going to go ahead and check the air filter at the same time, and check the battery date, which this battery date is only a year old, so we're good with the battery. We do need to check the air filter though. Yeah, it says pretty old.
Yeah.
And you can see the difference. I don't want to take a bunch of time showing you exactly each one, because each vehicle is going to be a little bit different. I will show you the kind of the basic breakdown, but if you can't do these fluids and your air filter and stuff by yourself, that's fine. You just take it in, and those are things, like I said, that I would get checked or changed. That's the fill. So we need to open that one up, and then you stick your finger in it, and you'll check the fluid. So I snuck outside real quick. What he doesn't know while he's doing that is that he's going to check all these fluids. He's going to do all the maintenance to make sure that's 100% ready to go, and then he's going to be the one that's going to end up getting it. He's going to be the one that drives it. So I didn't want to say anything though, so shh, don't tell nobody. The number 2 thing you want to do while you're down here is grease anything you can grease. So anything that's got a grease circ, tie rod ends, U-joints, ball joints, anything that'll let you. Sometimes they don't have a grease circ on them and they're just non-greasable, but if they are, we want to put grease in it. So while you're down here greasing everything, you also want to check your brake pads. And really all you got to do is just go in here and you can look inside. Sometimes you have to take the wheel off, sometimes you don't. In this case I don't. and you just want to make sure that there's pad there and that the rotors don't look rough or bad or anything like that. And you can also check, you usually can see the little wear bar and see if it's squelching or not. If the brakes are squealing, odds are, you know, they could be dirty. You may want to wash them out once, but if they're still squealing, then you're gonna have to change those too. So number 3 is checking tire pressures. That was one thing that we couldn't do while we were looking at the vehicle, but we're going to do after we buy a vehicle. So you want to make sure all your tire pressures are the same, if anything. So sometimes in pickup trucks and heavy duty stuff, your back tires are going to be higher pressure than the front, but it will usually tell you in the door or in the owner's manual what your tire pressures are supposed to be, and you can always double check that on the sidewall of the tire to make sure the tire, it'll tell you the max on the sidewall of the tire, and that way you know that you're not going over the max of what the tire can handle, which I've actually ran into with used cars before. They put the wrong rated tire on the vehicle. That one's only at 14. Yeah. See, so even though the tire looks full, that would be running almost flat on this vehicle. So that's it for number 3. Number 4 and 5 are 2 of the most important things, though, that I think you really absolutely have to do after you buy a used vehicle, or make sure that you have them. Number 4 is, now that we know we have a spare tire, we know that it's full of air, even though we do have to change that tire out eventually, where are the tools if you had to change it? If you have to replace a tire, if you get a flat, does it have the factory floor jack and wrenches to get this all apart? Do you have a guess of where you think they are?
It should be in the back.
Oh, why is that?
Because every car that I've ever seen there in the back.
Your Chevy had them up under the hood. So that's another important thing with number 4, is not only do you have the tools, but do you know where the tools are at. So go ahead and start hunting.
No.
Find it? Usually that jack is sitting right inside of here. That's exactly why that's an important step, because now if he'd had to change a tire out, he would have had the tool to do it, but he wouldn't have had the tool to actually pick it up off the ground. So fortunately I keep some extra old bottle jacks. When I buy them, I get them. We check the bottle jack, make sure it's good. We'll make sure we got a wrench that fits it, and then that way he has a jack and the wrench to take spare tires off if he has to. So number 5, the last one, and one of the most important things I think you need to do before you take off on your first drive, your actual first drive, is when you go and buy a vehicle, you're always looking at it on a nice day almost every time, because nobody wants to go look at a vehicle in a snowstorm or at night or in a rainstorm or whatever. So with that being said, the wiper blades themselves, the wiper knurl, the actual rubber on the wiper itself, I want to make sure those are good, because this has happened to me multiple times. Is I buy a used vehicle and I take it, and then I hit a rainstorm or a snowstorm a few weeks later, and that's the first time I've actually had to use my wipers in something detrimental, and they are horrendous, and they just blur everything out. Then I'm struggling to find an auto parts store to find new wiper blades. So we're going to check the wiper knurls front and back, and then we're going to clean the windows, because that's one other thing that almost always gets neglected, even when you clean a vehicle out, is in the windows. You hit a nasty late winter sunset or an early morning sunrise, and you can't see anything. The easiest way I've found to ever clean windows, and some people may argue with me, but I'm going to tell you right now, newspaper and Windex are amazing, and that's what I like to use, is just newspaper and Windex. So there's a few other things that you definitely want to do when you buy a used vehicle. If you're going to keep it for a long time, you obviously probably want to put a tool kit in it, a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher definitely, and a handful of other things. But this was really, I just wanted to go over the facts of, this is what I would buy, this is the things I check when I buy it, and these are the things I check before I go and drive it around. After that, then obviously there's other things you want to add to it. So we checked the wipers. The front ones are good, the back one's not, so we'll have to get a wiper blade for that. We cleaned up all the glass. As you can probably see, it's shining a lot better, and that's going to help a lot when it comes to bad weather situations. So I think we did all 10 things now, all 10. So you've seen the 5, what I consider the 5 most important things when you go to buy a vehicle, and the 5 most important things after you buy a vehicle, so you can drive it, so you can feel confident in taking it down the road. other than that, thanks Ian for your help tonight.
Yeah.
And I think that I think we did a good job. What do you think?
I think we did.
All right. There is one more thing though.
What?
Since you are a senior this year and you are going to head off to college, would you want this to be your college car?
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
No, you're flipping this.
No. I was just messing with you. You want it to be your college car?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Alright, well then you better get in it so we can go drive it.
You serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. Artec.
You got the keys?
Yeah.
You're serious?
He still doesn't believe me, but it is his. So we'll see you guys next time. I hope you like this video. If you like this one, check these ones out. Drive safe.
I will. Alright. Love you.
Love you too.